Welcome to this week's edition of Coach Prep. Coach Don and I are working on Zoom this week. We've got a fun topic for you this week. We're going to talk about coaches relying on stats, and if you're going to use statistics, how better to use them and how better to frame your use of them in your team settings. So before we get into that, though, let's talk about patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. Please become a patron. We've got a great group of patrons that have been supporting us for a long time. We've added a few people here recently. We would love to add some more. And the only way that the Everything Fast Pitch and Coach Prep are going to stay alive, folks, is if more people come on board. You've heard me talking this last few weeks about how some of the costs and things continue to go up. As I've said, many, many times, Coach Don and I are not making any money doing the podcast. We just love doing it, but we also can't afford to go broke doing it either. So if you see value in what we're doing, if you can support us and become a patron, we're talking about $5, $10, or $20 a month. And I'm pretty confident that if you're as crazy about fast pitch as I think you are because you're listening to our podcasts, you probably see value in what we're doing, and you could help support us by becoming a patron. So one of the things, Don, that is always brought to my attention in dealing with parents and players is people talking about statistics, comparing my batting average to somebody else's batting average, comparing the number of extra base hits I have to how many extra base hits somebody else has, the impact that those statistics are having on players' roles, maybe their spots in the order, maybe the amount that they get to play. And wanted to talk about that today from a coach's perspective and give our coaches something to think about. So it's up to each and every coach to decide how important statistics are going to be to you. And depending upon the setting that you're in and who's keeping your stats, your statistics can be incredibly valuable and useful and tell a really compelling and important story, or your statistics can be useless and completely meaningless and have absolutely no value to what you're trying to figure out and what you're trying to do when it comes to decision making, lineup changes, batting orders, and those kinds of things. Now, to kind of get the thing off on a solid footing, I'm going to tell you all, I never cared about statistics at all as a coach. But the place where my career is probably different than most is the vast majority of my time I spent coaching in the school ball setting at the high school level and at the college level. And in those settings, the statistical information that we got, I think, was really pretty accurate. It was a pretty good reflection of what was really going on. When I was coaching at the high school level, we had a team manager who was keeping the book, and he would sit in the dugout with Terry and I. And anytime there was a question, was that a hit? Was that an error? What was that play? We would be able to deal with it nonstop. And he would ask us questions as the games would unfold, so that when we got the statistics at the end of a game, if it said Don was 2 for 3, Don really was 2 for 3. It wasn't Don hit a ground ball to the shortstop, but it went straight through her legs, but it didn't get touched, so we're going to call that a hit. Or that it was a routine pop-up that landed right between the second baseman and shortstop, and neither one of them called it. We kind of knew what was happening, so that when it said that Don was a 600 hitter or Tori was a 200 hitter, what that really meant. So the statistics, I think, had some validity, but I've always felt in my situation, being able to see players on a daily basis, getting to work with them all the time, that I had a feel for who were the best players. So I didn't feel like I needed to look at somebody's batting average to decide who should hit leadoff and who should hit fourth and who should hit ninth and who shouldn't play, because I had a lot of opportunities to see what was happening and make my judgments based on what I was seeing. Now, in some other situations, maybe the statistics aren't as legitimate, maybe they're not as honest, or maybe we don't have as many opportunities to see a player, so we have to have something to fall back on to help us measure how players are performing. So all that being said, here's the idea. If you're going to use statistics, there's nothing wrong with that. But as a coach, you need to decide before the season even begins how much value you're going to give them. And then you need to let everybody on your team and in your community know how much you are going to value them. If you're going to be the coach who says on Sunday, 9 players with the best batting averages are going to play because on Sunday we're trying to win the tournament and we're going to make sure that the 9 best hitters play every single game, that's your choice. But you need to share that with the players on your team so that they understand that the only thing that matters if they want to be in the starting lineup is what their batting average is, or their fielding percentage, or your pitcher's best ERA is going to pitch the championship game every weekend because that's clearly our best pitcher. If you're using statistics that way, that's your choice. And whether it's right or wrong is for each coach to decide. I certainly would not do it that way, but that doesn't mean that I'm right about everything. So, however, we're going to use statistics, if we're going to use them, how we're going to use them, and what it means for the players, and honestly, the players' parents, so that everybody can be on the same page and know what the heck we're talking about and why we're making some of the decisions that we're making.
Tori, I'm glad you're talking about this stuff, and you're absolutely spot on, because I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've heard that I can't believe the coach isn't playing so and so. Their batting average is so much higher than player B, and they're just making a big mistake by not having so and so, that they're not in the lineup today. And also, to your point about when we coached in college, we had so much more insight than just the number. We had how they have been performing the week before. We knew that, they might have had the flu 2 days before this weekend's series. And, we had so much more input, or so much more knowledge to plug into our decision, and the competition level that they've been facing to accumulate those numbers, all kinds of different factors. So I agree that statistics are a good tell of many things, but it's not the end game. And if you are going to use it as your end decision maker, then let that be known up front, so there aren't people second guessing in the stands and causing chaos and commotion behind the scenes for your group or for your organization or team. And the little things that chew a really good group apart
Right.
is the unknown of those things. And stats are great. I like them as I'm coaching against someone, because that kind of gives me the heads up if they're stealing bases, if they're bunting a lot, if they're an opposite field hitter, or it gives us a lot of insight into how to work against a group that we might not be super familiar with. But so stats are good in many ways, but in order for just making our lineup, I think that we kind of already have a notion, and some of the travel folks might not have as much to base their decisions on, to let the rest of the group understand how you're going to use them. I think is a huge factor that will benefit each coach if they do exactly what you said, and kind of let it be known up front how that's going to factor in. And you made the point earlier about, was it a hit? Was it an error? And kind of the tickle all the time, about giving all the parents, or, 10 people or 9 people up in the stands, an H or an E. So every outcome, you look up in the stands and there's an odd number up there, right? So one's going to win one way or the other, as a hit or an
Right.
error, and then we kind of get a group decision on it. But yeah, that's exciting. That's good for our coaches. And if they can strategize a way to work through this and keep everybody tight and together, is the ticket. I love it.
Right. Well, and one of the reasons why I think that this was suggested was the whole notion of coaches using statistics, but somehow not using statistics consistently. And so, we'll have people that are really confused because one week the kids who had the best batting averages on Saturday play in the bracket game on Sunday. And then the next week, it's not the same thing, that the 3 best batting averages from Saturday aren't playing, or aren't as high up in the order, or whatever it might be, the next weekend for bracket play. And the reason that I think coaches get into trouble with it is, and the same reason why I don't think using statistics to make many decisions has much validity, is if you're playing in let's say we play 3 games on Saturday, and Don, you have 9 at bats, and you hit 9 absolute rockets. The left fielder robs you of 2 home runs. The center fielder makes a diving catch. The shortstop lays out going up the middle and snags a line drive. Every ball that you hit is an absolute rocket, but only one goes through for a double. So you're 1 for 9. but everybody in the world who watched those 9 at bats knows that you're crushing the ball. But your 1 for 9 batting average has you as the 11th best hitter on our team based on Saturday's outcome. For you not to be featured in the lineup on Sunday is craziness to me. But I know that there are some situations where coaches are basing a lot on the numbers, on the outcome. And to me, I think that's the first trap. Now, again, if you're a coach and that's what you choose to do, that's your choice. You can run your team that way. But you need to make sure that Don, who hit 9 rockets but isn't playing on Sunday, knows that the reason he is because even though he's a great hitter, he was unlucky enough to not get hits, or somebody else's 3 bloopers and a 5 hopper up the middle and a dinker that dropped in, didn't even get off the dirt, but it landed behind first base and nobody could make a play, that hitter is hitting leadoff on Sunday, that everybody understands that that's why you're making those decisions. And if that's what you want to do as a coach, that's fine. But here's where I think we get so far off the rails. And this is something that I know, Don, you've dealt with this with players and families, hundreds of times in your time in the instruction world, is the inconsistency of one day my batting average gets me in the lineup, the next day my batting average doesn't make any difference at all. 1 week statistics mean everything for who's playing, and then the next weekend statistics don't mean anything at all. And again, the inconsistency, I think, is the problem. And I don't. The other reason I don't like statistics is, as you said, having the polling the families of every play to decide whether it's a hit or an error. We always know that scorekeeping has bias in it. If I'm a pitcher's dad, I'm much more likely to think something is an error than if something is a hit. If I'm the shortstop's dad, I'm a lot more likely to think that a ball is a hit than a ball is an error. If I'm a hitter's dad, I'm a lot more likely to think everything is a hit and nothing is an error. And so we have to understand that. And in the world of Game Changer and everything else, where everybody has access to those decisions, I think we're just setting ourselves up for a whole lot of trouble. So, coaches, if you're going to use statistics, that's your choice. But make sure that you're upfront, honest, and honestly honest with yourself about how you're going to use them, and be consistent with how you use them moving forward so that there's no surprises. The worst thing, Don, and you talked about this briefly, is nothing tears a team apart faster than players and parents not understanding why you're making the decisions that you're making. And if you're allowing that to happen, if you're creating that by changing your guidelines on a never-ending basis about how you're deciding who's playing and who isn't, I think you're going to be heading for a whole lot of aggravation and a whole lot of unhappiness. So make sure you reach out to us with questions, comments, ideas, suggestions at everythingfastpitch@gmail.com or fastpitchprep@gmail.com. Coach Don and I love talking about stuff that you're interested in. We would love for you to stay in touch with us. Please become a patron. Go to patreon.com/everythingfastpitch. Again, it's $5, $10, or $20 a month. We would love for you to come on board and help to support us. Make sure you go to the fastpitchprep.com website, order your Square Cuts training discs there. They're $49.95 a dozen. Now that we're past the holiday season, we can get them out to you right away. And again, it's a great tool that is explained to you on our fastpitchprep.com website. Go to the YouTube channel. There's a couple of short little tutorials, and we'll get those Square Cuts training discs sent out to you right away from our fastpitchprep.com website. So for Coach Don McKinley, our producer Stan Lewis, this is Coach Torrey. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week.